Do you have an idea for a community project in your neighborhood? You could be eligible for up to $50,000 in funding through the City of Seattle's Neighborhood Matching Fund. Grants are awarded to grassroots projects that build stronger communities, with an emphasis on projects led by impacting Black, Indigenous, and people of color BIPOC communities. To learn more about the Neighborhood Matching Fund or to see if your project meets the criteria, visit seattle.gov/neighborhoods/NMF.
The beat of the Fox with nastiness is back on K-Fox Night Beat.
Yo, what's the deal? It's the legendary Hall of Fame DJ Mixmaster Ice from UTFO.
What's up? Who you thought this is? This is Sir Mix-a-Lot.
And this is Terry Lewis.
And I'm Grand Mixer GMS.
What's up, y'all? This is DJ Third Degree.
This is JJ Hudson from the High Children family.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories. Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
That's my noise.
Peace.
1, 2, get down.
What's up, big and little homies? This is Masvita Maraire, host of Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world, your one-stop shop for Seattle sports. We cover preps, we cover college, we cover pro, we cover it all. Huskies, Mariners, Seahawks, Garfield, South, Roosevelt, Metro, King County. This is where you want to listen to for all the sports that's happening in Seattle. Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
See a bad mother.
Hey, Seattle, here are some storage tips to love food, stop waste. Onions make potatoes sprout faster. Keep onions away from potatoes. Ripe bananas give off a gas that makes the fruit around them ripen faster. Store bananas away from other fruits. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money. Save food. Save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media. Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Juan Cotto touching bases with you from the historic Columbia City Theater with my good friend. He's back. Took a little hiatus going across the state of Washington. Mick Hoffman, the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, and we are on your community radio station. That's Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And obviously, if you were here with us in the last couple of weeks, you've seen a little bit of everything, but we certainly did have a little bit of football last weekend, and I believe we're going to have a little bit of football this weekend. And when our producer for the Stars, Daniel Bellis, gets back to his location, we'll talk about that. But it's another exciting day. Mick, great to see you, and I'm sure you were out patrolling the state of Washington and finding out what's going on across the state.
Yep, we had a bunch of basketball. Volleyball going on over in Yakima, so I was over there enjoying that. Watched our B schools play in our 1A, 2A, and then we had state swim at King County Aquatic Center, which, if you've never been to that facility, I mean, for our students to have the opportunity to compete there, I think they're holding the Pac-12 or, well, whatever's left in 25 NCAAs in 2025 in that facility. It's an amazing aquatic center.
It's where they had the Goodwill Games.
Yes.
Back in 1990. I just came back from working for the Atlanta Braves, and I was over there and I saw that facility go up, and it's lasted the test of time. It's a little bit more than 30 years old, and you would never know it. It looks brand new.
No,
all of the international timekeeping, and it's such a world-class facility for our kids to swim in.
Yeah, they've definitely maintained it. I know they've done new lighting, HVAC, so it's not nearly as humid in there. It's comfortable for a swim facility to keep it warm. The dive platforms scare me just looking at them, the height of them and that. But it's a great place to watch swimming, the stadium seating and all that. And so our students, they really enjoy being there.
You don't want to take a 10-meter dive?
Not a chance.
Remember in camp, someone dared me, and I went up there, and boy, on TV, Greg Louganis used to make it look so easy. He would just go ahead and flip in there, and when you're up there, I'm just like, why? How does he? It's not only the dive, but why would you? How can you jump off?
Yeah, and to do it and make it look so easy, so smooth, it's like, no way, not me.
Different sports for different folks. Let me tell you, the ability to train your body up. Today, we're going to speak right about that. We're going to talk about the coach's role in shaping and developing the athlete's character, which is obviously maybe the biggest responsibility that a coach has and the biggest byproduct of participating in sports. And you're sitting here looking at two men who have coached. We've coached men, we've coached women, we've coached athletes on a variety of different levels. And you hope the thing that they come out with is the skills to develop and take their rightful place in society. And they say that sometimes sports doesn't develop character, it reveals it.
100%.
And that's the type of thing that we want our students to come out with, so we can commit, so they can be committed to their work, to their families, to their marriages, and to their communities. And certainly that's one of the most important things to do. Coaches play a significant role in shaping the character of student athletes. How do you feel, Mick, that the state of Washington prioritizes character development as an integral part of the coaching philosophy?
Yeah, it really depends on the athletic leadership in that school, of where it's at priority-wise, and how they hire. So, do they hire based on character? That's hard to teach. It's hard to get people to change with what they walk through the door as adults. The X's and O's, those are doable. So it really depends. And for the most part, when we have conversations, we hear that that's the priority. You can see it's very obvious where the actions aren't aligned. And then again, it depends on the coach. We've talked about how in some situations the whole focus was on winning at the school. Coaches' jobs depended on how many football games they won or how many fast pitch games they won. And if that's the measure that the athletic leadership has of their coach, then character is going to be a distant second. So it really depends on the expectations of the leadership in the athletic department.
We've talked about this several times on this particular show over the last year. And before we go further, let's discuss what character is, because it's such a big nebulous thing. And as people hear us speaking about character, and I was listening to the popular podcast, The Pivot, with Ryan Clark and Channing Crowder and Fred Taylor, the former running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they were talking about coaches' relatability. And certainly I was coached in the old school method, with the old school and the new school. Yeah. And I don't think our coaches had a lot in common with us. There wasn't a common thing. They were all a little bit older than we were. And they asked us to do it, and we did it in the manner that they asked, with the intensity that they asked, on the tempo that they asked. And when they jumped, when they asked us to jump, I asked how high, and I'd get up in the air, and I wouldn't come down until they told me to. It seems like it's a little bit different today. That today's coaches that are successful seem to be a little bit younger, and the relatability. And I think now, as we're talking about character development, how much does the relatability have with this newer generation of kids who have been brought up in a little bit different manner through their athletic journey?
Yeah, I think you are spot on. We definitely don't have as many of those long-term coaches, and so we're cycling through more coaches, and coaches are there's positions for younger and younger coaches, which does allow them to relate to their players better than what I would do today or what others did who I played for. I think it's a huge asset. The question is, are they in a position, like, where are they at? What are they about at that point? One of the things, when I was a young coach, I got my first head coaching job at the age of 28 in basketball. And I wasn't real sure of myself. And so I coached a little bit out of fear. And that showed in how I coached initially. And I really had to work at, luckily I came across the right people who helped me adjust to that. And so I think as we're hiring younger coaches, we need to prepare them differently than we prepared our coaches 30 years ago. Part of that is mentoring. What can we do? Part of it is reassuring the coach. We have to coach the coaches. As an athletic administrator, that has to be done. We have to make sure those coaches know clearly what we expect from them. Is it to build a program, get more students out? Is it to teach students how to act? Is it to teach skills? Is it to win games? And all those are things we want. What's the priority? And I think for younger coaches who may not have that confidence because they don't have that experience, the athletic administrator becomes an even more important position, which the challenge with that is we're seeing this high turnover in that position. So we need to find a way to provide all that for those young ADs or new ADs, for those young coaches, so they become those athletic directors and we get some stability and we benefit from the learning curve of young coaches relating to their players today. So we don't go back to that old school method. Not that it was terrible, it's just different. And in today's world, we don't see that as effective.
The development of character, once again, I mean, and the way I try to describe it to the kids was, are you the person that I see when I'm not in your presence? And are you doing the things that you say you're going to do? Are you doing the things that you need to do when you're not in the presence of us as this kind of an ad hoc group? Sports is an ad hoc, it has a timeline. Hopefully, and some of the teams right now are getting their timeline extended. They're playing a little bit longer into the school year. Some sports are done. But while you have that timeline, while you have that time together, you're a part of a team. You have practices and you have to be there on time. And you are hopefully developing something that is going to be successful, how you guys define it as your group. And I'm just wondering, when you were a young coach, and maybe it changed when you became a little bit more experienced as a coach, how did you really work to instill those values into the kids that you were coaching at those times?
Yeah, I think you have to be clear with them what your expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we all want that, right? We want that from our boss. We want it from our friends. We want it from our significant others. Like, what do you expect? What do you want? What do you need from me? Not in a negative way, but so I can try to do that, because if I can't meet those, this is going to be a frustrating relationship. I think you have to do the same thing with your players, and be clear. It's about playing hard. It's about playing within the rules. It's about putting in the work to get better. It's about celebrating. Like, as a young coach, I didn't celebrate those internal wins along the way, right? The kid who was afraid to use his offhand, then all of a sudden shoots one in a game and misses the layup, right? I'm worried about winning the game, what people think of me as a 28-year-old coach, not the fact that this kid had enough confidence and trust in all of us to try. Now, I'm not going to yell at him for missing it, but to do it. And so, and making sure they know it's okay, like what kind of mistakes are okay and which ones aren't okay, because there's some mistakes that aren't okay. But
it's such an important thing, because and that's why I love this format as opposed to the television format, and I love the podcast format, because we can dig into this. How do you separate those as a young coach or as an older coach? Because the parents were clamoring we weren't winning enough football games.
Yeah.
Although I go back, and as I recall, if you look at all the important measures, I mean, I had a bunch of kids who had 1.6 GPAs, and they were over 2 finally.
Yeah.
From a 60% truancy rate, getting kids to attend class over 98% of the time. We're having tremendous success on our measurables, but then people are coming and telling me, well, the ultimate measurable is Friday night.
Yeah.
And it seems short-sighted given the nature of what we were doing and where we were, but at the same time, and those pressures tend to creep into who you are.
Yeah.
And knowing that you're making a difference and never ultimately being satisfied because you're not seeing the results on the scoreboard. How do you resonate all that?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's where you as a young coach, you really need that leadership above you to be supportive and be there at those tough conversations. That's number one. Number two is, the students have to believe it, because eventually, in Washington, we don't allow recruiting. So we know it doesn't happen, right? But your program will recruit kids, right? And so if you're a program of integrity, you take good care of your students, you have good expectations for them, you're going to eventually draw families that believe in that, right? And from 8th grade to 9th grade, they get to make the choice. From 9th grade to 10th grade, they can make the choice to move to your school and just play JV for a year. But if what they're moving to, they believe in, and they believe that's what's best for their student, they'll do that, right? We know that happens. I mean, we can't necessarily, a coach can't tell the kid to come do it. But when word gets out about your program and the character that you expect, right? What are people doing when no one's watching, right? Are you living, what you preach? You're going to start getting students, and winning will eventually take care of itself. But it takes time. And as a young coach, you got to have people, whether it's somebody who's well respected by your parents in your community to reinforce you're doing the right things, to be there as your advocate as a young coach. That's one way. No, and hopefully that's your athletic director. If you're in a situation where that's not your athletic director, go find another spot. Like, there's a lot of coaching jobs now. It's way easier now than it was 25, 30 years ago. So you can find your place, create your program, and the wins are going to come. Right? If you build it right, wins are going to come, because those young kids are going to see people celebrating, having fun. They're going to have good experiences. And the people are only about winning. They're going to keep bouncing around like popcorn, right? And eventually be mad at everybody, because they're never going to get anything out of it. They're going to win some games, they're going to lose some games, and at the end of the day, they're going to be unhappy. But your students are the ones who are going to recruit for you when they're gone. They're going to be the one talking about coach and about the school and, the little things you did because you took them instead of going to Vegas and playing in a tournament and, losing by 50 points. You maybe took them to Vegas to get the experience, but you also took them out to Hoover Dam. You took them to the water park. You went and caught a game. You went and watched Mark McGwire hit his 34th home run the year he set the record. Like, those are things that kids remember, and eventually their kids are going to become around. So you just have to be able to outlast the short-sighted people to be able to build your program.
There's a sensitivity as a coach as well, right? Because I know, for example, you feel like you handled a situation maybe not in the best manner you could. You maybe rose your voice a little louder than you had intended to. You may have stepped on some toes of some young guys who were really trying to do some things and maybe in their own way growing as you think on it. I think what's so reassuring is that I was at a couple of Mariners games this summer, and I ran into a couple of kids from the Highline coaching experience. I ran a couple of kids from the Nathan Hale coaching experience, and man, they're just so excited to see you.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that makes, I think that kind of hopefully you got it right, because they respect you.
Yeah, 100%. That's the scoreboard that you should pay attention to, right? Do they reach out to you on social media, right? Do you get invited to a wedding? Do they tell you about the children they're having? Do they send people to you for counsel when things are getting tough? Do you get to go play golf with them? I mean, those are all things. Do they ask you to go to lunch? Like, those are scoreboards. That's the scoreboard that matters. When we talk education-based, we want to win games, but when people trust and love you like that, you're going to get the talented players that will also trust. I'll give you an example. We just finished volleyball, 2A volleyball in Columbia River, in Yakima, Columbia River High School. I think it was their third state championship. They didn't lose a set in this tournament. Their coach, Brianne Smedley, she was at Coopville, and she was looking to move, and she went to Bruce Brown at Proactive Coaching, and she was like, hey, Bruce. Bruce worked with her teams every year on character development culture, right? And she's like, where should we go? And his comment was, you should look into Vancouver Public Schools because you won't believe what they're doing down there. So when we were down there, our athletic directors and our athletic office, we worked together about building a program built on character, culture, doing things what we believed were the right way, with the idea wins will take care of themselves. And we had some people who didn't buy into it and they didn't last. Well, she heard about it from him. She called us. She interviewed us. She took the job. She just won her third championship. And she's gone through 3 or 4 ADs since she's been, I think she's had different AD all the last 3 years. But her program is there. And even in that, with that winning, I was told, I haven't talked to her, but I was told that last year when they were up at a tournament up there, they brought Bruce in for a meeting. Might have even been at state because they had some internal issues between kids, right? Start to get some success. People start having different motivators. More people want to be involved and tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing or getting. So she brought Bruce in to work through that, right? So that's a coach, young, that has worked with several ADs, but knew what her program was about. Can obviously coach her fanny off, gets kids in there. And now in Vancouver, when they're deciding as ninth graders where to go to school, where do you think they want to go?
Right there.
Right? She put the work in. They weren't that good when she first started, but they're doing it the right way. We told her, we're not worried about how many matches you win this year. We're worried about you building a program. I mean, there you go. I think it's 3 in a row. Didn't lose a set this year. That's remarkable. And again, it was because a person of character who sees a bigger picture of her job as a coach wanted to go someplace where that would be supported. She found it, and now she's doing it, and no one can beat her. I mean,
and that's building a program.
Sure.
And that's building a program with character and integrity.
Yep. But and that was a program that struggled for a long time. And there's a lot of rivalries. They played at Ridgefield for the state championship again. Who's in their same league, right? So it's not like they have a free pass to get to state. Skyview High School is right next to it, big 4A, very prominent school. And those students have to choose in that neighborhood which one they go to. And the volleyball players, for whatever reason, are choosing to go to her because they believe in her and what she's doing.
He is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, and obviously a very, very sage, wise individual. I'm Juan Cotto. I am one of the many, many, many personalities you see on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world. And once again, we will be back at it this weekend. We'll be telling the stories of our sports and of kids in our communities through sports. I believe we're going to be 5 o'clock, the O'Day Fighting Irish. Did they get the time right? Actually, it's a 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock start. Another version of the city championship. So we see this in basketball all the time. We see the Metro League championship, and they'll go into districts. This is the equivalent of that in football. This is the round of 8, and this is where the playoffs really start. Down at the Metro Memorial Stadium, the Garfield Bulldogs, they went over across the Cascade Mountains, and what an exciting time was for those students. For many of them, probably the first time they've been out of the city of Seattle. And they cruised over to Mount Spokane, and they won a big football game. And their treat, the reward they get is now they get to take on the number 2 ranked O'Day Irish, a team that they played earlier this season. And this is going to be a really good football game. I know Garfield's extremely motivated to show they have a little bit more than they did in that particular game. It was a big O'Day victory. But nevertheless, the Fighting Irish, they came out and they took on a very, very game Auburn Riverside squad, and it was a game that was much closer than the score indicated. And once again, we saw some great coaches over there at Auburn Riverside putting their kids, and they fought till the very end. And congratulations to them. But O'Day taking on Garfield, and then after that, a game that we saw a couple of years ago, the Eastside Catholic Crusaders taking on Kennewick. And Kennewick actually went all the way to state championship before losing to Bellevue that 2 years ago. But Eastside Catholic, the Crusaders, obviously one of the top-ranked teams in the state of Washington, and they had a big ball game, and I think they took on Hermiston. They were able to win that game, and Kennewick and Eastside Catholic will be a classic. Those kids from Kennewick on the eastern side of the state, they are not intimidated whatsoever, so it should be a good game. I also want to bring up that tomorrow night and on Thursday night, we have the Cloud Break Festival. We've got some great musicians, Tim Davis and Daiwa Arumba, right here at the Columbia City Theater. It should be a nice night of great music. And of course, on the 16th, the effervescent Josephine Howell, if I can use that word to describe her. Absolutely love Josephine. And if you haven't heard that voice, she will sing right through your heart, through your soul. She's got an amazing voice. Thursday night, if you're into music, come down here, have a great time with the Rainier Avenue Radio crew. Coming up on break, here we go. I was going to talk about leadership is often cultivated through sports. How do coaches mentor and empower student athletes for life, both on and off the field?
Yeah, they can do it a variety of ways. Number one is they have to be intentional with it, right? It takes a lot of work. And so coaches need to be, coaches do a great job of teaching skills, hitting, catching, and all that. What do we do around character? Like, again, going through what is character, and it's what you do. So how do they teach perseverance? Like, how do they teach toughness? We, sports, we talk about being tough. We talk about being resilient. Well, how do you do that? You have to talk about it with kids, because what you think resilience is might be different than me, might be different than somebody else. For some kids, resilience is just getting out of their house in the morning and getting to school, right? For other kids, it's being, rejected from an Ivy League school. It's all relevant to them. So how does a coach break that down? And one, they got to know their students, who they're working with. They got to know their personal stories. They got to know what their needs are, but also teach it intentionally. So we've talked about, why don't we create, and there's some groups out there now, Positive Coaching Alliance and some others, that are saying, let's work on this as a skill like anything else. First 5 or 10 minutes of practice. Elementary teachers have this figured out. Every week you have a character trait they work on, kindness, right, for the week. So then they talk about kindness every day. What is kindness? They ask for some examples. And when the students do it, what do? They point it out. So how about as a coach, if we're going to teach resilience, we talk about, if I'm doing it with basketball, okay, well, resilience might be trying to take a charge, getting hit hard, and physically having to come back from that. It might be, making a great move, get called on a bad travel and having to get back and play defense now and come back. It might be coming back from an injury. So we can talk about each of those situations each day, have kids think about, oh, you know what? Okay, now I understand what resilience is. And then in the course of practice, point out when kids do it. Find that kid who's struggling, that's getting it handed to him by his playing partner in practice. And when he sucks it up and shows some resilience, like, stop practice and point it out. Like, if that's what you want to teach. And we have some coaches who do that, right? And so the question is, how do we do that systemically? That's what we need to build out. We're not there yet, but fortunately, more and more people have seen going back to the proactive coaching and Positive Coaching Alliance and Inside Out, that more coaches are doing that. I wanted to point out one thing, though, when you're putting up the previews, Garfield High School, right? So I travel all the way from Seattle to Spokane. Now, first of all, we get a lot of comments, sometimes what I would call whining or complaining, about where people get seated and having to travel. We heard nothing from Garfield.
I bet that was the most exciting week for
Zero.
those guys.
Yeah, so think about it, Coach. I mean, you're saying what a positive is. They got to go over Snoqualmie Pass and see how beautiful that is. It's within an hour's drive of their homes, right? So if they get the opportunity to go, like, here's a place you can go out and see a part of the world that is absolutely incredible, that people from around the world come to see. They got to go see Eastern Washington. They were on a school bus, most likely, for about 5 hours doing it. No complaints, right? Coach didn't make excuses for them, right? They focused on winning. They went over and got an upset.
I can only imagine how much fun they had. We have 1 minute. Let's do 2 really quick commercials, 30 seconds each. You mentioned 2 organizations and one a mutual friend of ours who's one of the coolest guys in the world, Bruce Brown, and the books that he puts together and the service he does to coach coaches.
Yeah, I mean, you go on their website, Proactive Coaching, and buy those little pamphlets. Like, breaks it down simple. What is character? What is sportsmanship? How do you? What are the basic fundamentals of a beginning coach? It's some of the best material that you'll ever find.
The Positive Coaching Alliance.
Yeah,
their classes are fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely, and they have a lot of bandwidth with theirs, and so they're servicing people around the country, and they have lots of resources of people who have done some incredible work with it, and it's free, right? So there's, and they have some for a fee, but a lot of their work is free. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have both of those operating out of Washington.
We will be back on your community radio station with Mick Hoffman, the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.org.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not shouting, "Ba-dee-ya" at city council meetings, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Love food? Here's some storage tips to keep it fresh longer. Store cut fruits and vegetables in the fridge. Place in reusable containers. Keep bread in the freezer for longer storage. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money, save food, save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
Mga kaibigan, ito po si Kuya Bert Kawili.
And this is Miles Salvador from Australia.
And I'm Norb Kawili, also known as Norbcam.
Kung gusto niyo po ang latest news and events from the Philippines at yung local Filipino community, PhilAm Radio po.
We play Filipino music and interview guests from all around the world.
And I'll keep you updated on the latest Seahawks and sports news.
Kaya always tune in. PhilAm Radio every Tuesday, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
And in YouTube and Facebook. Salamat po.
Welcome to the Fitness Corner. I'm your host, Mark Bryant, and you're going to get a whole total body workout on my show, starting off with a warm-up, aerobics, strength training, cool down, and stretching every Friday from 11:30 to 12 right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
Generational wealth is having financial security and not having to worry about it for yourself, your immediate family, and future generations. It's a very elusive idea to me personally because it's not something in my immediate experience, and it's only something that I'm learning about a little bit more in theory and knowing or trying to know if that's like a real possibility for someone like me.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Create your generational wealth for you and the future of your families.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
You viewers don't get to hear what Mick and I hear. I miss the bumper. Usually we get a little bumper working, but no bumper. I miss my lead-in music, but I think you probably got that listening to it. This is Juan Cotto touching bases with you on a beautiful sunny Tuesday afternoon here on Rainier Avenue, 4916 Rainier Avenue South. If there's anybody looking for me, I just gave away my location, so I'm going to hide behind Mick Hoffman here, who is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. And this is our WIAA Primetime Weekly. And we don't sit here and just talk about sports, and we don't sit here and talk about the teams and the players and the performances. If you want to do that, there's a zillion different websites where you can do that. We sit down and we talk about what is the real impact on sports should have on kids in our community. And we have those types of conversations. We think that it's a very effective conversation to hear more. And I think that parents have also let us know that they've really appreciated this conversation and this look at it, because it's much more than X's and O's, and it's much more than scoring touchdowns and dribbling basketballs and kicking balls into a goal or hitting them. I know Mick was hitting a few golf balls this weekend and hit a little sore from that. But,
not very well.
But the opportunity for us to sit down and talk about the importance of athletics in our community and the impact that it has on our children's lives and also on the impact that it has on our community. So it's such a special conversation. But before we go into that, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, Saturday, the State 3A round of 8, the Elite 8 teams in the State 3A, which is the third largest classification or the second lowest classification, however we look at it. But the 3A schools, there's two really good ones going to be playing Saturday, 2 o'clock, kind of a matinee down at Memorial Stadium. It's the O'Day Fighting Irish, the number 2 ranked team in the WIAA versus the Garfield Bulldogs. They weigh in at number 15 or 16 or whatever they're at. But let me tell you something. It's going to be a tremendous ball game. And I know that Garfield came out a little, probably just a little shocked by O'Day when they played a couple of weeks ago. This is about a month ago. The Garfield Bulldogs, the pride of that community. Both schools celebrated their centennials last year. My mom is a Garfield grad. I'm an O'Day grad. She sent her son to O'Day. I'm sure there'll be a little tension in our house, but good kind of tension. And I'm looking forward to seeing the ball game. I'm sure it's going to be a good one. And then following that, if you like good football again, I mean, you saw it 2 years ago, the Kennewick, they're coming over here and they're bringing a heck of a football team once again to take on Eastside Catholic. Kennewick, give them credit. They ran through the gauntlet a couple of years ago. They eliminated O'Day with sophomore Jason Brown. Then they eliminated Eastside Catholic the very next week. And that was an extremely good football game. And they really shut down two teams that really create a lot of havoc over here in Western Washington. And then they played an outstanding game and just barely lost on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, to Bellevue. So this will be a good tune-up to see where both these teams are at. And they are two state perennial power. So Kennewick taking on Eastside Catholic. You're going to want to take a look at that one. Then, of course, we have Cloud Break. We have some cloud break. We have some sunshine this week. I don't know if Tony got together with the National Weather Service, but the Cloud Break Conference, and we're actually getting some cloud breaks. So tomorrow night we have Anton Arunga and Tim Davis, two very, very popular jazz artists here in the community. And then, of course, Thursday, one of my all-time favorite people, Josephine Howe, is going to just overpower everybody with that incredible soulful voice. So, hey, 4916 Rainier Avenue South, your community radio station, and your opportunity to come down and have a great time with all of us. I want to talk about sportsmanship, Mick. And you talked about the Positive Coaching Alliance. And geez, we're starting to see some of the craziest things across the country. And I hope I don't have to go into it, but we're seeing assaults, not only assaults, but assaults with deadly weapons at youth games, and teams losing, and they are injuring each other, the coaches, they are injuring referees. It's getting a little out of hand. And I think sometimes I wonder, does the state have to get involved? Some of these different places, maybe, hopefully not here in Washington State. I went to a conference a few years ago at the NFL, and they told me that the biggest problem, one of the biggest things that they are working on in the state of Florida is adults betting on the children's games. Yep. And then when the team loses, what those coaches and what those parents do to the opposition. And then when the kids come to practice on Monday, I mean, they try to run them, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, geez, you got to be talking about 18, 19-year-old kids. Like, oh no, Juan, these are 8 and 9-year-old kids. Yeah. So the sportsmanship angle of this, and for us as adults to act like normal human beings and accept what happened out in the field. If you can't lose, my dad always said, if you can't afford to lose, then don't play. And you get your team prepared, you go out there, and it should be able to reward your kids after a victory or the lessons that come with a loss. And you congratulate the opposition, because the opposition is important. Yep. You want to play somebody who's going to challenge you. But are we losing a little bit? And then, of course, I'm not speaking just in Washington State, but I'm just speaking as a culture. Yeah, no, totally agree. And that's, we see a lot of that bleed over. I think I've mentioned a few times on this show that club sports right now are the largest unregulated business in the country. And
we see it to some extent in Washington in our high school and middle schools, but we definitely see it in those community-based ones. The coaches are the key to this whole thing. The coaches' expectations, because as the coach, I decide who goes on the floor of the field. And if your character, if the way you're going about your business isn't up to my standards, you don't play. I get to control that. And in the club world, guess what? Go to another team. And then the parents, I get to decide how involved they are. And if the parent's the issue, and we hear this in school sports right now, sometimes some students aren't accepted onto a team because of their parent. How sad is that? But as a coach, I can control that. So I have control, and in that setting, they need to do something about it. We have the same issue, not to the extreme, because there's other regulatory groups like the WIAA, right? When it gets too far ahead, it's about the money. I mean, I have a video taken from the state of Washington of a gentleman yelling at kids getting ready to rush onto the football field at Lumen for a game that they played. And the kids are probably 6 years old, maybe 7. And he's yelling, "Get your hats on and get ready to go F somebody up." This is the coach's instructions to 6, maybe 7-year-olds. And somebody there took the video, sent it to me and said, "This is what's wrong with youth sports. What are you doing about it?" Well, I'm telling the story today because people have to realize, like, that's a coach, or appears to be a coach because he was in the tunnel with the team, getting them ready to go out and go. That's the kind of stuff going on out there. So again, the coach is setting the tone of what's acceptable, right? We talk about culture. Culture is easy to define. It's what leaders allow. So if the coach is the leader and he is doing that himself, or he's allowing others to do that, then that becomes acceptable behavior. And the lowest level of behavior you accept becomes acceptable level of behavior. So that's where coaches play a critical role. So how do we do that? Parents are going to have to decide what they want for their students' experience, their kids' experience.
It's really interesting. I was at a school, and one of the basketball coaches came to me and said, "Coach, I don't understand how you can do it." And I said, "What?" He said, "How can you sit there and coach for 3 hours, yell as much as you can, and your words you use, you never cuss. You come up with these words. I mean, I heard you say Jiminy Christmas, and I heard you say, son of a biscuit, and all these different things. How can you come up with that? How can you just come up with a soliloquy?" I said, "Because they're kids. They're going to model what we do."
Yeah.
And I just felt that was an expectation that we had to make sure that the kids are going to pick up on all of our cues, all of our verbal, nonverbal cues. You really have to make sure that you're reading, because I think they pick up on your psychology, and it also reveals the character of the coach.
Absolutely.
But also as we are hearing and as we are seeing, the parents and I had a friend of mine that said, "Oh, Juan, geez, you're just talking about some crazy people." I don't know if we are. I think this is starting to. I think that the expectations and how we as a culture accept victory, or accept defeat, and it's so noticeable when a team wins and loses. All you have to do is look at the headlines about Russell Wilson in the last month. They lose a few games in Denver, and they don't want him anywhere in the city. They win 3 in a row, and now he's not that bad a guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we're talking about students. I mean, sit back and think about this for a minute. I do this. I get to go to all our events. It's awesome. It's fun watching students have fun. Smoke going off when we introduce them and all that. And almost none of those kids are going to play beyond their last high school game. That's the reality of it. And we have people completely losing their minds over it. And the only hope is that as these students who are experiencing it from the student perspective become the parents, they look back and they say, playing 3 sports at one time, 7 days a week, was really not that much fun. It was too much. I was tired of sports by the time I was a sophomore in high school. Or my parents spent this much money to do this. We could go on a nice family vacation to the beach or to the mountains or to Hawaii or wherever they want to go. And then the other piece is it was really important at the time, but now that I reflect back on it, It was more about the relationships and the experiences I had than winning and losing. I mean, I can tell you what place we took every year, but I can't tell you, other than my senior year, every game we won. I can remember the really important ones. I can remember the really hard losses. But other than that, they all kind of blend together. But I remember the people I played with. And I remember the things that really, really made a difference in my life. So, you know, it astonished me. I coached some AAU basketball a few years ago, and some great people involved in it. And there's other ones where the coaches were chasing the officials off the floor, and they won't kick the team out of the tournament because they brought 6 teams. And all 6 of those teams then won't show up next time and pay the $350 or whatever to get in the tournament. And if they don't show up with the level of competition they brought, the other prominent program in Northwest won't show up and bring their 7 teams, and then the college coaches won't pay to come. And so it's all transactional business for a handful of kids to get a scholarship. But in the meantime, you figure on 13 teams, roughly 125 students are being exposed to this kind of behavior and expectations from the adults that we tell them they should respect. You should respect your coaches. Yet we're, as parents, at times we're allowing our kids to be coached by people who we say they should respect that don't exhibit what most parents want to see in their own students. That's what has to change.
I had a coach at O'Day High School, Ed Hensley, passed away in 2001. A wonderful man, and always treated me like a son after I graduated in that 18-year period when I would see him. Lived over here in the Lakewood Seward Park area, and had an opportunity to obviously develop a relationship with him in high school. Seemed to be very, very tough coach from the city of Chicago. Loved the game of baseball. Absolutely loved baseball, but motivated you in a very soft way. Expected the best out of you, pushed you, but at the same time knew how to let off. Really told you what the expectations were, worked with you, made sure you learned the fundamentals, and also how to handle it when it went your way, and also when it didn't go your way. Yeah. In baseball, I mean, 7 out of 10 times it's not going to go your way, but nevertheless, really did a great job of establishing what really for me became my coaching philosophy and working with kids. I was wondering, do you have any special stories or special people like that who worked with you or who are now working in the state of Washington you feel kind of exemplify that type of attitude?
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. That's how I got into this business, was a former coach. And, it's really interesting. I've watched him. He just turned 69 years old here in October. And when I played for him, he was old school. He was a guy you didn't talk to. He did what he said. He barked and screamed. It was supposed to be painful, right? And we ran at the end of every practice. And, my upbringing, that wasn't too unusual. So, okay, I can deal with that. And for whatever reason, he was a lower level coach. And then when I became a varsity player, he took an interest in me, and we got to know each other a little bit more. Like he'd like to go to games. I like going watching games. So I'd go with him and help scout. And so we got to know each other a little bit that way. I got out of high school, and he's the one who called me when I dropped out of college and got me to go into coaching. And he eventually lost his job. He eventually got the varsity job, and he lost his job because of his relationships and interactions with players and parents. Not everybody appreciates. There's a small minority of people who appreciate that old school, hard ass, basically coach. It's a different world. And so he ended up, and it was devastating. And, but we talk about resilience. So what I saw in him was about the time I was getting a varsity job. And I will let you know, I beat him 3 out of 4 times. So we do keep score. I don't let him forget. 3 out of 4 times, my team won. But he lost his job, and he ended up, I was going to hire him onto my staff, but he got an opportunity to coach at another school, and he went there and eventually became the varsity coach. And I watched a total transformation in how he interacted with his players. He still had high expectations. He still coached incredibly hard, but he did it in a way that related to students and had great success there as well, in a totally different coaching style. We made fun of him for being soft and being the new wave coach and all that. He knew I had incredible respect for somebody to change their way of work, their business, who and how they presented, because they knew they needed to. And so for me, that's really helped me personally and professionally. That's why when I ran into Bruce Brown, it was around that same time, and realizing like I can do this better differently. And so trying to translate that in how we set up programs. We understand people are going to make mistakes. Coaches are going to make mistakes. Students are going to make mistakes. We make mistakes, right? Most of them aren't, something that you can't recover from. And if you do it with best intent and then really work to change what caused the behavior, and that's what we're looking for in coaches, right? As a young coach, like we got to know, hey, you're going to make some mistakes. You may call timeout at the wrong time, but there's certain things you can't. There are fatal mistakes, right? They can't cross lines with kids. But everything else we can learn from. And if they're willing to, then we got away. So, for me, those were, I was very lucky to play for a lot of different coaches. And after I got out of coaching high school and got into athletic administration, my son was coming through, and I got to do it all over again with a different group of kids, 4th grade through high school, and the greatest experience ever. So
it's really interesting, the conversation around, and you brought it up, and one of the things that I have to deal with in my own life is the ability to accept mistakes.
Yeah.
And I was educated in an environment where you taught not to make mistakes. And I remember we had pencils, and we were in math class, and they took the pencils away from us and said, you work in ink, because I don't want to see you sitting there with an eraser. You're not going to make mistakes. And it was a little difficult environment back then. And don't know if I learned algebra any better, and you had to scribble a lot of stuff out. But mistakes. And I think it's an old philosophy, and I think it might be a military philosophy, might be a philosophy here in this community. We build aircraft, and everything's got to be so specific. But in the tech world, and Bill Gates has talked about this, Elon Musk has talked about this, and I don't want to go into any politicals with those two guys, but I'm speaking specifically about what they teach and how we learn.
Yeah.
They say that you have to be able to make mistakes, because the mistakes are the residue of effort. The mistakes are the residue of design. The mistakes are things that you're gonna have to learn how to deal with common mistakes. And sometimes you can learn from the mistakes. At 3M, a guy made a mistake putting paper. He had some adhesive, and he was putting it on the back of the paper so he could stick it on the wall to keep notes for himself. And they told him to stop doing it. He said, well, this really is helpful. And then some of the other people in the building started doing it. They said, wait a minute, we've got a business here.
Yeah.
and they created what is now $1 billion business with sticky notes.
Yep.
And that was all out of a complete mistake. And it was something that they were trying not to tolerate, yet it worked out. How, as coaches, can we allow our kids the freedom of learning, and at the same time allow them the flexibility to make a mistake?
Yeah. You teach them, what kind of mistakes. So I'm going to use basketball because that's what's most familiar to me. So I always tell them, let's make a lot of mistakes in practice. Like when we're doing our ball handling, if you're not drop kicking the ball upstairs, you're not going hard enough. You're not challenging yourself. I want the balls bouncing around. If we have a perfect practice, we're in trouble, right? And so, and I grew up, perfect practice makes perfect play. But perfect at what level, right? If we're trying to grow. Now, what a mistake that can't be made is not knowing what defense we're in, not knowing who you're guarding, right? Not knowing how many fouls you have. Like those are mental mistakes. Like those aren't acceptable ever, right?
Dropping the football on the 1 yard
Dropping the football on the 1 yard line.
Poor kid.
So, but there's other mistakes you want them to make. And you hear coaches, like I'd hear coaches talk about they want to be up tempo, then they yell at a kid every time they throw the ball away. Now, wait a minute. If you're playing fast, aren't you going to make more of those kinds of mistakes? Yeah, you're going to make more of those mistakes. And so you have to, as the coach, understand like what's an acceptable growth mistake and what's unacceptable. We can't have those. And do it and teach them in such a way so they understand the difference. Not every mistake's the same.
So he is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I'm Juan Cotto. I am the voice of Metro League Baseball and certainly a personality. I do the quotes, but I got my stuff in my hands. The quote personality here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Friday night football, the O'Day Irish, Garfield Bulldogs. That's going to be 2:00 in the afternoon. We have the Kennewick versus Eastside Catholic following that, and that's going to be on Rainier Avenue Radio approximately at 5:00. Give it take a couple of plays there, so it might be a little bit later, but nevertheless, both those games will be on your community radio station. And feel free to listen in and hear the 3A football. We have the Cloud Break. We have Jazz here tomorrow night at Rainier Avenue's headquarters here at 4916 Rainier Avenue South. We have Atana Runga, and that's Tim Davis. Looking forward to hear them. And then obviously on Thursday, that will be Thursday night. That will be Josephine Howell, one of the most powerful voices in our community. And obviously, if you enjoy jazz music, come and listen a little bit and just spend some time over here at your community radio station. Mentorship and guidance from coaches goes far beyond the sports field. What can we do to have coaches help setting goals and goals beyond just the what's going on the score, but goals for their lives, goals for their classroom? How do coaches go about setting these, teaching goal setting and working with kids to achieve any personal goals that they have?
Again, they just ask them to do it, right? I mean, especially as they know their students better, they can help shape what those goals may be. So if a player is confiding, right, they've communicated well between coach and player, they've built a relationship, they start, if they get to the level of a trusting relationship, they can have different types of goals as far as, because they're going to know more. But essentially, we always ask players to set goals. We set them as a team. So have them set personal goals. We do this in our office. Ask them to set some of their professional goals tied specifically to their work and our core covenants, kind of our association culture, and then a personal goal, right? Like you need to keep working on yourself personally. So is this a professional growth goal? Is this a physical health? If they got like me, where you're not taking care of yourself, like, okay, I need to make a goal to do this and then be held accountable to it, have an accountability partner along the way. Do the same thing with our students. Like our students, when the students know the coach cares about them more than just what they produce as an athlete, they're going to produce more as an athlete, right? But more importantly, a coach is going to meet their true mission, which is to make them better people. We teach the soft skills that people need to be successful in life through sport and activities. We talk. You've mentioned several of them: how to fail publicly, how to lose publicly, how to interact when things don't go your way. I mean, those are all things that can be taught if a coach is focused on growing the student and not just winning games.
As we're kind of winding down here and coming up on these final couple of topics, what resources or training is made available to coaches to break some of this stuff down? What can we give to coaches? What can we give to parents to make sure that the ultimate outcomes of what we're looking for are the things that our students are getting, and make that just as important as winning the state championship?
Yeah, no, great question. And that's actually what we're working on building out currently. We have Inside Out initiative going. So Joe Ehrman and Jody Redmond, evidence-based practice, nationally known, working with coaches around why do you coach? Why do you coach the way you coach? What's it like to be coached by you? Asking some basic kind of core fundamental questions to get to the point of how are their students receiving them, not just what do they need to do. So we're doing some of that. We're working with University of Washington coaches leadership program to develop 5 fundamental classes that potentially every coach would take around child development. 30 years ago, most coaches were educators. Now about 50% or so come out of the work world and don't have that formal training on child development. And, most people are parents. Most people are pretty good parents. Some people are not. You know what you know. And so what we're working on is the first class is done, Foundations of Coaching. and then build out the rest. So we have some of that. We're working with OSPI, Superintendent Reichel, on a bill that would provide some funding to provide sustainable programming to do this. Right now, we're not funded to provide that type. The schools are expected to provide that for their coaches. We know what's going on with school budgets, so we're trying to find a way that we can invest in our students in a different way. So if we're successful with that, we'll be able to provide some really creative and effective evidence-based best practice programming for our students.
Mick, my son today, they're going down to O'Day's practicing for this game on Friday night down at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah.
The games this year, or going to the championship games, are going to be played at Husky Stadium.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I'm sure that the kids who went out to Mount Spokane last week had such an exciting time. It's so great to hear. My son was so excited, and I'm one of these people in the community who's always kind of wishing that the Seattle Public Schools and Seattle Center would put more money into Memorial Stadium and maybe refurbish it a little bit. And obviously, we know that's happening, and the bill's been passed and via the election a couple of years ago. But it's still great to hear that kids love to go down to that old venerable stadium.
Yeah, I mean, again, it means something. There's history there. Even if they're not familiar with the details of the history, it means something. It's in the middle of their town, right? It's a community focus. And that's what sports is, especially football, because anybody can play football. You think about it. I mean, of the different positions, from kicker to the lineman to the quarterback, there's different skill sets, different type of athlete needed for that. So anybody can play football. So it brings a wide perspective of community members together around an event, and just based in our American culture and where football sits. So yeah, not a surprise. It's awesome.
It's so interesting. The kids love it. As I was telling Clemente, the mayor played there, Bruce Harrell.
Yeah.
The governor played there, Jay Inslee, when he was at Ingram High School. Mick Hoffman, thank you so much for spending your time with us and coming and discussing these issues and diving into them with the forthright quality that you do. Thank you so much. Daniel Bellis, thank you for all you do for us. And we will see you next week, same time, same station, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.org.